Having a good night there, Tom?
I'm trying to get my ears situated. I'm hearing like three different things at once.
Trying to get back out of the reverb. We'll see how we do from there, though. You got a good camera angle going there. Got your keyboard going. Nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this to like performance mode.
Sweet.
Play, change.
They got the ridiculous going on this end. So I can see what I'm doing on this end.
Yeah, I got that too.
Nice. Ah, D major.
Well, actually, I didn't fix. That's the one thing with setting up these keys.
It doesn't follow you each time, yeah. You were doing G minor before that we were looking at.
Yeah, I was actually doing G major there. And depending on how you set that, changes how it notates.
Yep. Everything should have the one sharp at this point. And just like that.
But it is nice for learning. Like,
oh yeah.
I can see what you're doing.
The other awesome part is somebody was playing a guitar or a bass. We did that, and you were playing something, and I knew what you were playing. I could say, oh, he's playing in G major. They can make a G major happen like that on the guitar. Yeah, just like that. I like it. Although I do usually keep it on the keyboard instead of, yeah. And it also tells you in the little top corner there what the intervals are, what the chord is you're hitting. It's 7 or 9. Sharp 11.
This will make a good learning tool.
Yeah, definitely. It will help a good bit. But rhythms also help a lot too. And that's one of the things where I started stealing them out of my Casio keyboard here. Trying to get something to start with that's a little bit more involved than just a click track. Because the click track's not always ideal for starting, but you need something that's consistent to get going. So I just started pulling the different rhythms out at 120 beats. I'm still a ghost.
All right. Situated with my wireless headphones. I'm getting a crackle out of my Mackie tonight that I'm gonna have to investigate.
Mm-hmm. Everything else sounds okay though?
Setup. Yeah. With these, everything goes back to normal. When I switch over to the Mackie, while I was testing with Lou earlier, it just started crackling, and I thought it was coming from his end. Turns out it was my mixer.
It happens. The more we complicate these things, the more the points of failure click in, and you never know which one's going to be the issue this time.
Well, and every time I mess with the settings, then it's remembering where you were in a good. That's what I was trying to tell Lou. Like we need to calibrate it. We need to write down those settings, and when we do change them, we need to be able to go back to the good settings.
Yep, it's important. Have a baseline. And if things aren't working right, think about which things have changed from the baseline and start stepping them back one at a time to see what's going on, rather than try to change everything all at once and you don't know what you did to fix it or what you did to break it. But if you start stepping back one at a time, like when it was working perfectly, we did this, and we only added one thing since then. That's the one thing that's probably messing you up right now.
And that's why you don't want to change a bunch of things at once.
Yep.
When you're trying to get that setting, don't change 3 things at once, because then you don't know which one did good and which one did bad.
And if you fixed it, you won't know next time either. You have to try all three things, even though two of them don't apply. Always tricky. But it's always worth having a bag of tricks in your pocket to try things. Be willing to try lots of stuff to see what fixes it.
Getting used to this digital equipment, the challenge nowadays is not just like getting your equipment set up for yourself and sounding good in your room. It's getting it to sound good so you can send a signal to the Zoom. That's what we're dealing with Lou was dealing with Rob with that. The local sound is easy to accomplish. Getting it into Zoom and having it sound the same and as good. This is a new challenge for all of us these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of these programs like Banana, the ones you've been looking at to get all your stuff set up, these are the solutions. These are what people have to get more familiar with.
Yeah, that one was working out well by doing using the virtual cable. I can also use that to mute the Zoom, for example. Like if we were talking here and it was if the local sound was too much, I can just send the audio to the virtual cable and then it's literally going nowhere. And that way it's like muting it here, and then I can go do other things with the sound card and then bring it back if I want to later. Just another way of being able to flip.
And if you're doing it to the virtual cable, once you have it going to a virtual cable, then you can route it. Like Zoom recognizes the virtual cables. So if you can get all your sounds going to the virtual cable, Zoom, it's just a matter of setting it to it, and boom, you have multiple instruments, multiple microphones, keyboard, anything, all going into with the one Zoom microphone.
The keyboard and the Casio for the rhythm, I had those both going in through the view meter there, or through the Banana, and then was able to individually mix them so I can make them each as loud as I want, and also make the output of the whole channel as loud as I want. So you have a good bit of control that way.
Yeah, you've got both keyboards going through the virtual mixer now. I was going to ask you that earlier.
Yeah, because I pulled a third keyboard into the mix.
You're going to want to hear both. Yeah, you're going to want to hear the keyboards locally at some point, but you also want to hear them together if you're using a bunch of them at the same time.
The one thing I don't want to hear though is latency or lag. With when I hit the note, I want to hear it immediately. So like the sooner in the chain or the less complicated the chain, so I don't involve a lot of latency in the project is the best way.
Yeah.
Like right now, it's just going out through the audio out, so it's just as I hit it, it's instantaneous. There's no delay at all, which is ideal.
And it's as fast as. Like I see you hit the keys on the keyboard the same time I'm hearing them, so there is no latency.
Exactly, and that's important because when I had it hooked up through the MIDI, as I was hitting it, and also when I had it set up through the virtual cable, it was kind of from here to the virtual cable, then virtual Banana, like mixing it from there. And at that point, there was enough latency where it was a noticeable delay when I was hitting notes, and also when I was speaking. And the speaking part was messing me up more because my voice was coming back at me slightly delayed, in addition to how I'm hearing it normally right now. Like I'm hearing it already here, and then I was hearing it again after. So it was like a big reverb on the voice, as well as everything I was hitting being a little delayed. It's kind of annoying.
Yeah. Oh, and that'll mess people up more than the instruments. Hearing your voice come back at you is a mind fuck.
Yep. You were talking about that even just with some of our Zoom chats. Like if somebody has speakers on in the room, you'll hear your voice bounce off that back wall, come back in. It's like, no, turn that off. It's already a pain.
Or just in the case of like headphone bleed through. Sometimes when Ange has all her headphones like wrapped around her head, when she switches the headphones, I can still hear remnants of the other headphones coming through sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Depends on how loud they are.
Well, part of it is also if you just see where your boom mic is right here, and if you had another headphone that was sitting on your neck right here, I mean, that speaker is right near where that microphone is. And since it's not on your ears when it's down here, that one's open to the room. So it's just kind of yelling out into the room, and that microphone's just picking it up because it's nearby. But yeah, like when you have two or three microphones on the necks, they meet when you go up there.
That have the self-muting, like I bring this up.
Yep. Mutes out perfectly so we don't hear anything.
Bring it back down. The only headphones I will get at this point need to have this.
And actually, that was one thing is I didn't have any microphones in the house for that. But then this is the microphone I was telling you I got with the mic stand. So it's a mic stand that I got with a microphone and everything else. And the microphone does have, when I hit the kill switch, you just just kill it and come right back. So I like that because I didn't have anything that had that, and now if I'm doing like a talkback mic, for example, as a sound guy, I can just have this as my talkback mic, and as long as I keep that switch off, the mic is dead. But if I want to say something, I can just click it on and say something that comes right out the monitors at the band, and then I can shut it back off, so I can talk to them real quick if I need to. It's handy for that. But the other mics, like I said, usually you disconnect it, and put it back.
Those few moments where I actually like those mics that have that switch. Because normally I would be like, no, I don't want a mic with the switch because that's
extra point of failure. Yeah.
Point of failure.
Yeah.
And mics with switches tend to actually do crap out, especially if you use them in performance a lot. But they're so useful in this scenario.
Yeah, and that's why for me, this is the one that like lives in my house, and this would be the one that I'm using here. But it's like I can bring it with me for that as my mic, not as a mic that I would necessarily give to a singer on stage. Because again, the switch, they'll be like, "Oh, mic doesn't work." It's like, "Oh, click," you switch it back on, and it'll be fine.
But, or you got a singer that's like holding it and accidentally switches it while they're singing, and like, where did the singer go? And I've seen that.
Oh yeah. I mean, we have enough of problems with, most of them having wireless and this and that. And, they have good batteries? Did they check the batteries before the night began? Like, I have batteries here. It's like, I'll offer. And like, no, they're good. And then I put them in. And then halfway through the show, like, do you have AA batteries? It's like, I asked you before you started. You'd have a fresh set the whole night. But here, yes. Here's some batteries. Get going.
It's like getting people to charge your phone before you come on to the show.
Yeah. Especially if you're going to use it for words or whatever. I mean, not that that's a good thing to necessarily do on stage, but some people, they like to have a set list there or the words or whatever it is. Have it charged, have it plugged in while you're there, whatever. Just have it so that it's not constantly blacking out on you. So you're like, oh, hang on a minute, I got to double check the thing as you're flipping through stuff while you're on stage. Not the best look. But that's okay. I mean, no rules against it. And it depends what you're doing. If you're doing open jams and stuff like that, no big deal. But if you're trying to do something looking professional and all that, then you don't want to be flipping through stuff like that on stage. You should have everything memorized and something to refer back to. Sure, I take your notes on whatever, or have some reminders for the lyrics. But you shouldn't be singing like staring down at the lyrics the whole time and all that. It's not a good bit of stage presence there.
I would hate to be a singer because there's no way in hell that I could remember all the lyrics I would need to. I would need like a teleprompter or something. Can't
in some cases it's the reminders, like the beginnings of lines. Like, I mean, a lot of the songs, like if it's songs that very well, like, it depends what you're doing on stage. Are you singing stuff that's totally unfamiliar to you, or are you singing some of your favorites, that kind of thing? If it's songs that are close to your heart, how the songs go, and you might just need a reminder. So it's like, oh, we're coming into the second verse and I'm forgetting how it starts, just having those first couple of words, be like, oh yeah, as soon as in the evening, like, oh, boom, you're in the evening. Okay. So now you're on the roll. It gets you started, gets the ball rolling.
The only part I know about in the evening is actually the intro in the evening. And then I couldn't tell you any other words.
Yep. Oh, I love that song.
I'm the guy who remembers the hooks, the hooky words in the song, but the rest of it, it's why
it was never your focus. It was never your focus because you were never if you're not the lead guy, if you're not a guy who's out front, you're not really focused on it. So you're worried more about the piano parts, making sure that the parts that you're playing are the parts that are right. So like everybody has their own focus. As a bass guy, if I was never singing out front, I'm never worried about the words either. It's like, I don't even know what the title of the song is. Like, what key is it in and how's the groove go? Like, give me that and we're going, we're good. But you tell me, oh yeah, the song called blah, blah, blah by whoever. I'm like, but if you just go, dun, 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 dun. Oh, that one. Yeah, sure. No problem.
Yeah, I'm good at remembering parts. Like, that's the kind of thing that I can remember in a song. Once I learn a song, I can remember the parts and the arrangement of the parts, and that very natural. Couple of lines of words, not so natural.
Yeah. Yeah, and also the parts tend to repeat more often than words do. Words are, more of a story and they more continue on, and they may be similar, but it's not all the same. Whereas the music, it's if it's going to be A, C, and D, it's going to be A, C, and D, and then going back and going back and going back, and then coming back to that after the after it goes off to the chorus or whatever, returning back to the theme. But words are going to be changing every time around, and that's where you got to stay on top of that. But yes, I'm with you. I've never had to focus on that myself.
Remember the melody.
One thing about background vocals. Background vocals are a lot easier because a lot of times they're just repeating the last thing that the singer just said. Like they're singing their thing, and then as they say that line, it's like, oh yeah, that line, and you just kind of like throw in, your little part, and then they keep going on to the next thing. So You don't have
I
to remember
don't
as
mind
much.
background. I
Hmm.
don't mind background singing.
Hmm.
That I can handle.
Exactly. And having just a little bit, understanding kind of what needs to be done harmonically or understanding what the part is, just the more familiar you are with the song, the easier it is. But just making stuff
And
up on the
those
fly.
are the vocal parts that don't tend to get like me. I'm not good at playing and singing at the same time.
Yeah, nor am I.
Background
I'm getting better,
vocals,
but
u- usually those are much easier to sing.
mhm.
They complement whatever part you're playing.
Yep. And it seems to be that's been working out better also for us. Both me doing some more backgrounds like that, but also I'm starting to feel more comfortable being able to step out and follow along more with the main vocals too, while I'm playing bass. So it's getting my head around that. It's kind of like again with when I was learning, starting to learn drums and trying to figure out how to get the kick, the snare, and a third thing going at the same time. The third thing kept messing me up, and now it's like I can get three things going, but the fourth thing's messing me up. It's like as I'm
You ever try to sing while you ever try to Phil Collins it?
Oh yeah, actually, singing and playing drums is a lot easier than singing and playing bass for me. Just because
Really?
there are aspects of the bass line where it's not only the tempo of how things are going, but you're also moving up or moving down with notes, up or down. Whereas on drums, you don't care what key it's in, you don't care what note it's on, you don't care if it's major, minor. You just there's either boom or not boom. It's kind
But
of what you're
you're
doing.
trying
But
to keep a beat.
you're trying to keep a
See, for
beat. Yes,
me, I would imagine that's tricky. Like if I'm trying to sing a
yes and no.
melody
Mhm.
and I'm trying to keep a beat while I sing a melody, melodies do not always bounce with the rhythm of the drums.
It's true.
Melodies are the one thing that can actually do whatever they want and not necessarily follow the tempo itself.
But I find it harder to do it with the bass, though. I think the bass and the melody have, let's say, less in common or more conflict in my head when I'm trying to do those two together than singing and playing drums at the same time. Singing and drums at the same time isn't as much of a problem because I think what usually happens with me singing and playing bass, I either try to play the melody line I'm singing or I try to sing the notes that I'm playing in the bass. But when I'm doing drums,
Yeah.
there's no notes. So it's the timing and everything else. Like you said, it is tricky with the timing, but that's only one layer. I only have to worry about the timing aspect. I don't have to worry about is it going up? Is it going down? Is it major? Is it minor? All that kind of stuff goes out the wayside if I'm playing the drums. So I can just not focus on that, just sing and keep the groove going. And whereas on bass, there's much more potential conflict between what I'm singing and playing.
And I guess it depends on whether you have to concentrate on the instrument you're playing.
Mhm.
Um, that's why I have a hard time doing like piano parts and trying to sing because I'm totally trying to concentrate on my piano part just
Yeah.
to get through it.
Yep.
That I can't imagine concentrating on two things at the same time there.
And that's actually why
Drums, a lot of drummers are almost like in automatic modes.
you
You
have
know,
to. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
look at them and you can tell like the drummer's actually in his own world and he's just rolling around.
Mhm.
Those are the ones that would make sense to me that they can go use their concentration to actually sing a melody because they're doing the drums without thought.
Yep, I'll do that too. I was like, I'll start to get that. As long as the bass line is relatively simple, and I understand how the pattern goes and where we're going, where the change is coming, I can get my hands kind of on autopilot and let the hands do their thing while I sing the part I need to sing, and not really focus on the hands, and then just kind of look back at the hands and like, hey, you're doing what you're supposed to. Good, and go back to what I was doing. But when we're doing this in rehearsal, I will try to sing more to challenge myself to play. But then when I start seeing that the bass line starts falling apart, then I say, okay, now I back off the singing. And I say, okay, let me just stop singing for now, focus on the bass
Shift
part,
your
and
concentration back.
right, like
Yeah.
make myself focus on the bass part to get the bass part solid. Then maybe next time around, try it again and see if I can get that, to see why there was a conflict or why I was not able to do both at the same time. And it's been helping a lot. So like I've been able to sing a lot more. Like I'd say I can sing on almost all the songs that we do now, at least a little something here and there, whether I'm supposed to sing a part or not. I just, I don't always have a mic in front of me, but I'll just try to sing part of what she's singing so I can, see again if I'm able to play and sing and keep those separate in my head. So it's been good practice. Plus we've been getting
Yeah,
together a
and you're
lot.
lucky
So
you get to. Yeah, I was going to say you're lucky that you get to practice on a regular basis
yeah.
so that this evolves that way. Like,
Hmm.
I've gotten my parts down and hey, now I can try adding singing on top of that part.
Yep. And what I was saying, even today at rehearsal, one of the things that we do is we'll just start into a groove, and if Joey, the guitar player, has something specific in mind that he wants from the bass, he can either just tell me, like, oh, it's like this, bom, 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 like that, or he can play it for me on the guitar, and I'll hear it and jump in and play along. Or if it's something more complicated than that, he'll just go, here, can you play this chord and this chord and this chord on the guitar? And he puts the guitar down, he comes over and grabs the bass. So we switch, and I'll just play the rhythm guitar while he plays the bass line. I watch what he does. I get the feel of what he's doing. He gets the feel of what I'm doing. And then we switch back. And then he's getting what he wants from me because he just showed me on the bass what he was looking for. And then once we get that, and we get that as a platform, then we can kind of build and move on from there. But it's just a quick way
Yeah,
to communicate it real fast.
that's a great dynamics to have in a band.
Yeah.
When a guitarist and a bassist can actually just like swap,
Yep.
get the feel for each other's parts,
Mhm.
show each other like what they're looking for.
Yep.
You write you write better music when you can exchange instruments.
Yeah.
We were talking about that the other night, like the way the Beatles were. Jason was mentioning how
Mhm.
like every one of them could
Mhm.
play like every instrument, and
Yeah.
sometimes during their rehearsals, John would go sit at the drums, and
That was great. Yeah.
Paul would pick up the bass, and
Hmm.
uh, it adds to the dynamics of the songwriting.
It helps each person understand their instrument that much better to understand what the others are doing or what the others are capable of or what they can expect from the others. And that's where, the more familiarity you get, the better. And like even on the ones that we did today where we're switching back and forth between the bass and the guitar, and he's still saying like the next thing I got to do is get my keyboard parts down. So it's like he wants me to put keyboards down on all that too, whether I use this one or whether I use the one that's down at the studio still. This is the Casio that I took from the studio.
That's a
So
good thing. It's a good thing you've been bringing these keyboards home, huh?
yeah, good thing to be practicing on. And again, with the rhythms, like it's probably too loud, but let's see, just random.
That's not loud.
Yeah, it's got a nice little jazzy one anyway, but it was like happened to be where I left off. I think I got the first half in just little samples imported, but they didn't come in as MIDI. They're all just coming in as WAV files, so we're going to look at that later. We'll get them
Oh, you're
imported as MIDI.
sampling. You, yeah, yeah, you're sampling the audio at this point, which is
Yeah.
not a bad start.
Yeah.
You may actually want to do both.
Yep.
It doesn't hurt to have the only thing with the audio samples is that you might want to sample them at variable BPM. You
Yeah.
got a rhythm that you really like, you might want to sample it at 60, 80, 100, 120. You might want to do a multi-sample of that rhythm just so that you have it in a range,
Yeah.
because you can slide up like 5-10 BPM there. I would actually do it like every 10 BPM.
Mm-hmm.
70, 80, 90, 100. And that way, if you decided like, oh, I really want it to be at 75, you could take the 70 and bring it up to 75, or the 80 and bring it down, and not have too bad of distortion there,
And if it's
or
not
modulation.
too busy of a pattern, that's where 120 is kind of magical also, because 120 you can divide it evenly by 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30. I mean, 24. I mean,
Oh, it
it's
slices
got
to
so
60
many
beautifully.
options. Exactly. So you can get all those different slices, and they should fit nicely. Like you're saying, they don't always come out perfect. Sometimes you get some artifacting or what have you. But if you were trying to go from 120 to
when you stretch
91,
the
that would
wave.
be, that's when you start getting problems. When you start going to these odd numbers and things, when you start if you use even increments or even multiples, it works out a lot better. But that's where 120 is like nice and magic from there. But yes, any adjustments from there, I would take it at different levels. Like, they take the 120, take a 110, take a 190, like in those ranges. But something like a 60, I figure is already good because I can just take it at half at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
it also
worst
depends how
case,
empty it is.
I would do like 60, 80, and then 120 would be a good range too.
Yep. And like you said, because then you can modify any of those individually up or down a little bit with no problem. But if you were looking for something that's a little faster than this or a little slower than that.
Yeah, having them as MIDI though really will give you complete flexibility.
Yeah.
You take that MIDI and transfer it into a MIDI loop over on the computer, then you can change the BPM to 200, and MIDI
No problem.
won't modulate.
It'll regenerate.
It'll just play it faster.
Yep. And that was the trick. That's why you were mentioning something about channel 10. But when I was looking at the keyboard, it's got minimal options on the keyboard itself for MIDI, and I wasn't sure if I was coming in through Ridiculous for this or if I was just trying to do it all through Cakewalk. So I mean, I look at it all kind of
guaranteed on those Casios, all the drums automatically go out the MIDI through channel 10. So if you set up your Cakewalk and you set up a MIDI channel and you tell Cakewalk like listen on channel 10 and you're sending from the Casio through your Uno, Cakewalk should actually pick up anything coming out of those automatically through channel 10.
And that was the
As
question,
far
is
as
because like
drums go.
I could set up a drum kit as as like the active sound that I'm using, like instead of organ or whatever, I could set up a drum, and in that case, if as I hit things, it would register each hit as I was hitting it. But I was thinking the rhythm,
Yeah.
I'm not actually hitting any keys, so is it only
Well,
recording what I'm hitting, or is it recording what's coming in as MIDI coming back?
actually, it is recording. It is recording what you're hitting,
Mhm.
but with drum instruments, the reason why drums take a special channel in MIDI, channel 10 was designed for multi-instrument patches. You know, drums are a special kind of patch. Most other patches are a sound or they'll split the keyboard, you know, but they're set to a sound. With a instrument patch, a MIDI is a drum map is mapped for each key. So like A2 is a bass, and you know B2 is a snare. They purposely set up drum kits so that the drums you'd be looking for are close to the fingers that you might be playing with. So your
Right.
left hand can do a bass and a snare because they're right next to each other.
Mhm.
When you grab all those drum beats from the Casio, it doesn't even matter what kit that you're using over in Cakewalk. All it's going to record is like B2, A2, B2, A2, B2, like the bass, dum dum ch, dum
Mhm.
dum dum ch. That's just
Right.
going to be AAB, AAB to a drum kit.
Mhm.
And then later, that MIDI that you captured, you can say, oh, don't go to a rock drum, go to a jazz brush kit. And then all of
Mhm.
a sudden you've got a totally different flavor with the exact same beat.
Just like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, excellent. And that's the way you can change all the drums on the fly afterwards. But yeah, just getting them in there for now. I have it as just the sample. So like even now, just as songwriting ideas, like I can go in and be like, do I like that rhythm or that one, whether I have the keyboard here or not. I can just go into that project I have on BandLab and just, if I have 10 rhythms in one track, I can just unmute track 5 and listen to that one and say, oh, that one, yeah. And I have the names of which one and all that kind of thing, so I can get a feel for what I want to grab. Is it more of a Latin rhythm or a rock rhythm, or which one am I looking for? But just to have
Well,
some samples here.
as you're sucking them up from the Casio, and you're going to obviously want to name them accordingly, so
Yeah,
that
exactly.
and organize them accordingly. Like
Yep.
it,
Banks of 10. Yep.
if I'm looking for drum beats, you look at these MIDI packs. They have a lot of different drum MIDI packs out there, especially for metal.
Mhm.
There's a slew of metal kits out there and loops that you can go and they organize them nice and convenient. So if you're looking for the speed metal, you go here. You're looking for the thrash metal, you go here.
Mhm.
Old school, like retro metal, another folder.
Exactly. And it all depends on the kits that you want and the sounds that you want and all that kind of thing. For a lot of them,
Well, if you're really creative, after you organize them that way, you might go into one of those, remap the kit, and change the tempo, and next thing you know, you do have a jazz swing beat from a metal beat, or vice versa.
yep. If you like the hit of that kick better than that one, you could bring that in if you wanted to as an individual sound or replace the entire thing. Yeah. And just play it in a different style.
Plus, some of these like drum beats, I was talking with Soulmake about that the other night. Like some of these drum beats that you hear in this modern progressive metal are actually like jazz beats
Yeah.
that have been remapped and sped up,
Yep.
but
And
they're
sometimes we do
still
the opposite. We
jazz.
slow them down. So sometimes like we'll take we're doing something out in Pennsylvania with Jeff and those guys. And we'll start with just a regular 16 beat pattern or whatever, and then slow it down to half speed and just use that as like a basis and then build a percussion thing on top of that. So all we're doing is just looking for like the emptiest, just a kick and a snare, kind of holding things together and then build something cool around that. Like that was just like a
Yeah,
timekeeper and then just keep that going and, keeps it nice and simple.
yeah, like it's one step up from like metronome
Yeah,
approach.
exactly.
In the
It's
old
a metronome,
days,
but
you
it
just
sounds a little bit
turn the
more
metronome,
interesting. Yeah.
said, okay, dink, 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 find my groove. Now you don't want just a dink dink dink. A nice little snare bass combination can really get a song started
Yeah.
fast.
And especially if you're going to start dealing with like syncopated rhythms, like you get a little, da, 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 da. You get something like off tempo like that going on, and then that kind of gets a whole thing driving, and then you can build all around that, build the other pieces in. It's a lot of fun
Yeah,
that
and
way.
even that's easier to do. If you have some off time or weird timing, starting with just a nice basic bass snare combination, everything else that you want to add that's advanced, you can do as you go along. Or after, hey, we add all the parts, all the instruments, and now I'm going to go in and put those crazy fills and things, because sometimes on the drums, you don't think of those accents until you hear the rest of the instruments
Hmm.
and what they're
Exactly.
going to do.
Exactly.
A drummer may not know those accents they want to do until they hear the whole sound,
Hmm.
and
I
then
was
they
saying that
get
about my
put
bass
the
parts
little
too.
rototom.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
always
same
consider
with
like my
bass.
bass
Yeah.
parts to be preliminary. Like I put it in there and then I want to hear it again after everybody else puts their stuff in, and whether it's finalized or not, so that I can see if it still fits with all the parts that are in there now, or how it all ties together and all that. Because yeah, I might need
Yeah.
to
You
empty
you
my part
you
out a little bit or fill
you
in a little
nail
bit
down.
or.
Yeah, you nail down the root notes. You feel it out. Hey, if you're like early on in the recording, you
Mhm.
you get those root notes into the tracks, and then after you hear what the guitars are doing and everybody else, adding a second track that is the coloring beyond the roots. That's a good approach.
Yep. And again, it
Same
depends on
with
how busy the song
vocalists.
is. It depends on what style it is. Sometimes the song is a faster style than you were expecting, or a slower style. Maybe they thinned it out. All kinds of changes can happen from the first time you put a part down to when the final thing comes back to you. You can be like, "That's the same song, really?" Like, okay, and then redo
Yeah.
the whole part again. So
Or if
that
you have
definitely
one
have
of
to do
those
that.
songs where, a song that has a lot of different dynamics. Um, if you lay down your bass track and then everybody does their things, and now you're going towards the final, and you realize like there's parts in the song that need filling, like the, going into the solo, there's this hole here, and whether you fill it with the bass or the guitar or any instrument, sometimes that's why it's good to go back and do that second track, because you fill in certain spaces in the song.
Exactly, and you'll hear it
Or
differently
you
after it all
realize
comes
there's too
together.
much and you pull some out, which I
Yep.
wish people would do more of. I'm noticing that with myself too, where eh, as I'm doing some of these remasters and I'm layering and I'm layering and I'm layering, and I get so much shit in there that eventually it's like, whoa, there's too much going on at once. Now
Yeah.
I gotta isolate and pull back and try to focus on a certain instrument in this part, or
Yep.
get rid of all these instruments and let the singer shine for a second.
Mhm. Yeah, it's easy to get lost in that when you're first getting into mixing and mastering and all that, where you get onto each track, and each track in isolation, you work on just that track, you get it sounding beautiful, clean, whatever, you get it just to the right volume. And then when you put it all together, it's just a huge mess because it's all way too loud because you didn't account for how loud everything else was as you were mixing each one. You were thinking about each one in
Yeah.
isolation. And then when you put them all together, they're all building on each other and just making this enormous stack. And it's just too much. And you don't know what to bring down because everything's too loud, and anything you adjust isn't helping. So it's like, what did I do? But it's, yeah, you just have to think of everything
That,
in relation to everything else, where they all fit together, where they all sit, and just kind of build from there. It takes getting used
that's
to, though, for
been
sure.
something that I've been really trying to like my mixing. I'm still going through an evolution.
Oh yeah,
The
it is an
first couple of
evolution for sure.
years, yeah, the first couple of years I was getting used to the toys and the
Mhm.
sound and the things that like I needed to understand in order to route and mix everything.
Mhm.
Now I'm like going back to it and trying to get back to minimalist mode.
Yeah,
Like I'm, it's so compelling to add all these layers and all these instruments. I have access to them, and I want something that's full and lush. But I am realizing that
it's easy to go too
I
far.
I slam a lot in there, and I'm having to force myself to pull things back,
Mhm.
and almost go down to like a single instrument, just to focus back on the rhythm and the melody.
You will find that like even slight volume adjustments can really make that kind of stuff stand out also. Like if everything was kind of sounding too much together and you wanted one single instrument to stand out, if everything else just comes down even 10%, like by this staying as loud as it was relatively, it sounds like it just got pushed 10% to go even louder. So you can use tricks like
And
that
you
to make
got to
things
be
quieter to
willing.
make things louder. Yeah.
You got to be willing to get into automation there.
Yeah,
That is one of the
absolutely.
things that I kept trying to avoid it. Like, for the first year and a half, I was like trying to avoid it, thinking like automation's complicated. And, I had the basics of the automation down with Cakewalk, but I was always hesitant to like do too much of it because I thought it's going to get complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm realizing like those guitars do need to get pulled back during the chorus, and they need to come back up after the chorus before they go into the next verse. And you got to be willing to actually take the time through each track to pull the tracks that need to go back
Each
at certain
track. Yeah.
times and then push back at the other times. And if you do, the final product sounds like what the commercial products sound like.
Yeah, and
Because
that's what
those
people will do with vocal
engineers,
tracks too. They'll
they're
ride those levels to
humans.
get them all to exactly where
In
they
a
should
lot of
be.
cases, they're not even doing it through automation. In a lot of cases, there is a human who's literally doing it on the fly just to get that like human dynamics into the mix.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's awesome, and that's what
Like
gets
with
that feel.
live performances,
Yep.
in a live performance, you have to do it that way. You can't really automate a live performance. So there's a human who does pull certain channels back because it's a vocal solo for a moment, and then bring the music back up, bring the vocals back so that now they're level with the music again
Mm-hmm.
for dynamics.
What's funny is to go to a place where they already have a sound guy for the venue. Like sometimes I'm just working as a light guy or a stage tech or whatever. So they have people there already doing that. And when they do, I'm able to just to kind of observe what they're doing or how much they're micromanaging, let's say, the sounds throughout the gig. Where my buddy Mike, he's literally constantly adjusting a fader. Like if there's 5 seconds that go by that he didn't adjust a fader, that's a long time. And I'm like, what's wrong? Like, because he's literally always tweaking something. It doesn't mean that always just something that needs to be fixed, but it's just that there's always that something his ear could be better. So it's like, oh, I could use a little bit more of this, and then as soon as you adjust that, oh, now I could use a little bit more of that, and then so it's a constant back and forth where he's
He
adjusting
tends
everything
to
as
be
he goes.
familiar.
Oh yeah.
He tends to be familiar with the material. He's worked with the bands more
Yep.
than once, and
Mm-hmm.
as you work with a band on multiple shows, they're lucky to have someone like him who is familiar with their sets and
Yep.
when things need to go up and down.
And they always do give a set list, and some of those are more useful than others, where some it's just a list of songs and that's it. Others, it'll tell you the list of songs and who's singing it, or list of songs and anything special, like, oh, have to tune down a half, or this one, they bring the guitar in, or this one's a saxophone song. Like just little notes like that can really help us as far as, oh, they haven't used the guitar all night. And then on song number 7, all of a sudden it's going to come out. And if Mike's not paying attention, he's just busy mixing, and a guitar comes up and they start playing, like he might not notice. So like if I see stuff like that, I'll call it out to him just so I know that he sees it. But
And
that's
if
kind
it's
of thing.
not
If they
part of
did put it
song
on,
8, like you need to bring it up for song 7, and then if it's not part of song 8, make sure you turn it off.
Yep, you watch her like as
Otherwise,
soon as you see her
you
put it
could
down
end
on the
up with
stand there, you just
unnecessary
bring it
noise.
down. Yep, exactly. Or somebody steps on it and falls over and blam, he makes noise, whatever. I mean, things happen on stage. We had somebody stomp on a cable the other day. One of the singers, it was a small stage. The singer managed to, during a song where they run around and jump a little bit, he managed to stomp on the input, I guess, for the bass rig. That bass rig that's like a spaceship that I was showing you. Yeah, it's got
pedal.
18 pedals in the pedal board, and he stomped on the 1/4 inch input from it, and it literally killed the entire bass, where there's no signal at all, and he's just spends half a song trying to get it back together, and then he's like, I need a cable, so like I go run, grab one, bring it out there, set it up. But it was one of those things where you can't protect too well
with a
against that on
setup
stage.
like that.
Mhm.
With a setup like that, when you have so many things chained together, and you basically have that input and that output, those are the points of failure. Somebody accidentally steps on either side, all 18 of those pedals are done.
Yep. And so he started thinking about that, and like as soon as it happened, he literally put like one of his boxes just out in front of it and told the guy like, don't step there. Like just made a little defensive area around it. But I'm sure he's already got it in mind for the next iteration of the pedal board that he's already working on, to have those cables or those connections slightly indented or what have you, so that you have to actually open the thing, get in there, and get those plugs in, and that way nobody's stepping on the actual connector.
Yeah.
At worst, they could
After
crimp a cable
seeing
outside.
after seeing a picture of his how he did that, and when you mentioned that happened, I would build like actual a roof over those where the ends go in and out,
Yep.
so that if you
Yep.
did step on it, you'd step on the roof, not on the cable.
Yeah.
And hopefully, if you built a good enough roof, it could
Mhm.
take the brunt of a foot.
Yeah. And in his mind, I think he was thinking it would be stronger if it was just the connection is actually far enough inside where the only thing sticking out is the cable part. So if somebody did step, all they'd be
Now
stepping
that's
on is
the other
cable.
approach.
So that would be to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
those
yeah.
connections far
If the
enough in to not
cable
worry about
actually
it.
went in,
Mm-hmm.
the worst that they're going to do is step on a cable. They're not actually going to step on the end because the
Yeah.
end is inside the box. Yeah.
Yeah. And with the amount of time and effort that he put into that whole setup, it's like that's the kind of thing that he's thinking of for the next one, because he's already was talking about having
Oh
another
yeah.
layer above, so it's going to be that layer on the bottom with all that stuff, and then like a couple of the pedals are going to get
If
promoted to the
if
second
you're gonna
elevated level.
if you're gonna roll your own
Mhm.
effects processing like that, why not? Like build it into a tank,
Yeah.
especially because he's a stage performer. Y- that's the whole reason why you want to build that into a tank.
Yep. Got to be able to get it in and out of there.
Stage destroys instruments.
Yeah. But you do see how, some people you see take very good care of their stuff, and you see other people who take not good care at all. Like the guys who'll just throw a guitar up against a wall or whatever, not care if it's going to slide and fall, like when they throw it up there. And then you see other people who it's like, it's very gently back in the fur lined case. It's like people treat their stuff very differently.
Well,
So
even the ones who do take care of the guitars have told me horror stories of like being on the stage and somebody oops and
mhm.
watch as the Gibson goes.
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly what happened to Mike's Gibson. It was on stage at the Mountain, and Benny managed to knock it over or trip on the cable as he went by. The thing fell face forward, and it actually knocked off one of the tuning pegs. So one of the strings
And
just pitching gone.
the instant reaction from the musician is going to be like a motherly reaction, like "Oh my god!"
My
But
baby, yeah, yeah,
at the same time, it's hard to be mad at people on the stage, unless they are just being blatantly sloppy.
Mhm.
But if it is an accident, which will happen on stages,
Yep. And that's where road wear comes
emotions
from.
can really, yeah, emotions can really like go nuts there with bandmates.
Yeah. Well,
You
one thing I'll also say
stepped
about
on my
keyboards in
pedal.
particular, like you guys with keyboards, your stuff works or it breaks. I mean, there's not a whole lot of middle ground, right? There's not like a whole lot of you kind of yeah, that's a little bit whatever. No, it's gonna either completely work or it's gonna completely break, or like that note no longer works. And that's gonna mess you up if that note no longer works and you need that for a concert. So like keyboards is gone if it's gone,
Oh,
but
I would hate to run into a dead key. Fortunately, most keyboards, you don't dead keys is not a problem with synthesizers. Like you said, either it doesn't turn on at all,
yep.
or all the keys work.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like some of the pianos that I've come across where you will occasionally hit a dead key on
Or two that stick
especially in
together.
schools, and
Mhm.
yeah, that's what happened on my baby grand towards the end.
There's like you hit those hammers that just lock together. So you hit that low C and you're getting a C and a B or whatever. It's like no good. Not what you were looking for. But it
Unless
happens.
you're doing some metal.
Yeah, you can do that. A little Phrygian, sure. B Phrygian. That works. But yeah, the instruments, it's nice to see though. And they the guitars and the basses and all that, even when they do seem like they got really damaged or broken or what have you, they seem to be repairable in a lot of sense. Like you could do a lot to repair something like this more easily, it seems, than it would be if you broke a keyboard where it's something electronic and it's inside and it's just dead.
Most times, if a keyboard dies, there's nothing you can do to repair it.
Yeah.
I mean, with the exception of like keys, the
Mhm.
buttons, you can have a button on a keyboard that craps out. That does happen, especially with the older keyboards. If it's not an important button, most keyboards are like, fuck it, I don't I don't use it, so I don't miss it. But if it is an important button, um, you either pull off the case and end up replacing that button, which is a lot like surgery, or you
Mhm.
remap the button.
Right.
Because a lot of these buttons you can substitute another button and say, hey, when I press this one, do
Mhm.
what that one did.
And that's easy enough to
That's
do
the
with the
nice
MIDI
thing.
stuff because it always wants to learn. They can say, "Oh, learn," and then do this when I do that, and it's just
Yeah.
very intuitive how they put that together.
Yeah, a lot of these buttons are basically either modifying like a changing a patch or a level,
Mhm.
um, transpose. That's a button. Steve had a keyboard where his transpose buttons stopped working. Well, at least one of them did. So he couldn't. He could go down, but he couldn't go up. Which you know you don't want to go down unless you can go back.
Mhm.
So he did have to like open it to replace it. He didn't have to do that. I told him. I said, you know, you can remap that button to
Mhm.
another button.
Right. But that would be confusing or what have you. So yeah, I can see other people being hesitant for that because
Well,
that button's supposed to be there, and that kind of thing. But
it
if you're gonna
it's
do
as
it, if it's
much
to
of a
do it or
learning
not do it,
process.
yeah.
Yeah, you have to ask yourself, do you want to learn how to remap a button and not open your keyboard?
Mm.
Or do you want to learn how to open your keyboard and get a replacement button, fix the problem with the original one, and put the new button in? Personally, I'd rather learn how to remap a button than open my keyboard up.
Or the third option that most people take, which is, my keyboard's broken. I need a new one.
Buy a new keyboard. Hmm.
So many
It's
people
like
jump
what
down
people
that road
do
too.
with
Yeah.
computers.
Yeah.
Oh my God, my computer's not turning on. It's broken. Buy a new one.
Yeah. I mean, if
Turns
it's been
out
enough
it was
years,
just not plugged into the wall.
and if it's been enough years, you probably need a new one anyway. So in that case, it's probably a good idea because computers, people don't seem to change them often enough, in my opinion. Just because being from a corporate background, it was like every 2 to 3 years you should have a new computer. And there's some people here who are 15 years later they're still using the same computer. And there are legitimate things that you
You
can
know,
do musically with old machines, but some people they just try
yeah,
to
well,
stretch a
in
little
a
too
work
far with it.
environment, it makes sense in a work environment to continuously keep them up to date. But in a music environment, that's not always the case. I mean, you will see studios out there that are using 10, 12-year-old computers and they're still very functional with them. It all depends on the other hardware that you're using. If you had one of those Firewire recorders and mixers that were huge from like 2006ish to like 2012,
Mhm.
you would need a 10 to 12-year-old computer right now to keep using that piece of equipment because
Mhm.
they didn't they didn't play nice with new operating systems. Firewire was just a fiasco. So you've got this awesome I've got this $1,500 mixer that I never got to do anything with. All automated, could the sliders will move with the computer.
Nice.
The only way for me to use it is to have a computer that has a Firewire interface that none of the modern computers do. And
Mhm.
it has to be on Windows 7. So I have to have a, a caveman computer just to use that piece of technology that was ahead of its time.
That's the thing. It has
Irony.
to be. It has to be that right little slice because it has to be new enough for this and old enough for that. So it's got to be right in that little overlap window where it's just new enough for this and just old enough for that. So yeah, you'd have to find
And
the
that's
right
why
level.
when you're buying hardware like that, an audio hardware where interface and what you're plugging into, that's why you should give some thought into, like, right now, if I was going to buy an audio interface, it would have to be USB 3, USB-C lightning port. It would have to be a USB format that is going into the future,
Yeah.
not one that was the past. USB 2 served its purpose for the longest time, but I would not buy a modern interface now that was stuck in USB 2 because it's only going to be a matter of a year or two before you're going to start to shoehorn yourself into old technology just to use it.
Mhm. Yep. It does move fast, man. That's for sure. People complain about that all the time, how
And
fast things turn over and how fast things get obsolete. But the thing does, I mean,
yeah,
the innovations do come that fast, and it's just it's a matter of staying up with it. Some of the stuff, like you said,
and
will
whether
work
the
fine 10, 12 years down the road, but a lot of it there are certain breakpoints where it's you need to be up on this level and then you need to be up on that level. There'll be little quantum jumps every once in a while that you just have to get
Yeah.
on board with.
How backwards compatible it is. The nice thing with USB going all across USB 1 to 2 to 3 is it's always been backwards compatible as it went forward. So you get more bandwidth with the USB 3. Main reason to go with it. But they also started to get smarter with the plugs. You can't plug USB 3 in the wrong way. Like, it's not like the rectangular tongues that USB 2 was. I've seen people force plug a USB in backwards and totally mess up the port and the device that they were trying to use.
I remember they used to do
With
that with PCMCIA
this one,
network cards. It's terrible.
oh yeah, that was a big problem. But with the new USB, they basically got rid of that. They took the like Apple approach where whether you plug it in this way or that way, it works.
Yeah.
It doesn't care which direction you do because it'll work on either side. So that was a big plus, a big improvement with USB, and the speed is definitely good. That's future proof for the next 10 years. Anything that I'm going to try to plug into this computer through that port, it's more than fast enough to handle. I'm not going to have any latency with my audio. Christ, you could have tons of audio channels pumping through that USB with that bandwidth. USB 2, you will hit walls if you're trying to 10 20 tracks going through a USB 2 certainly could start to sputter and chunk up.
Definitely.
Or power consumption would be the other problem.
Yeah.
USB 3 doesn't really fix the power consumption problem so much, but it does give you better distribution and options.
It's more of an end user problem at that
and
at
hubs.
That point. There's just how many things do you really need to plug in directly to the computer through the USB at the same time?
And how
for
much
right now?
how much power does it need to suck from the actual power supply of the computer? Because that's the problem with Jason ran into that a couple weeks ago when he plugged one too many USB devices in, and next thing you know, the keyboard crapped out and everything shorted out for a second. And while you're in the middle of a show, USB power could do that with 2. With 3, it distributes better, so it's less likely that it will do something like that. And if you really are plugging in like 5 6 devices, hard drives, audio cards that are using a lot of power, a lot of those have external power supplies, so they don't draw off of the computer's power supply or the USB in that case.
What I was looking for
That's
over here
something
was
always consider.
I have a power strip that I bring with me for sound gigs, and it's one of the ones where at the end of it, it's kind of like this big club or like a big ball at the end.
The USBs.
And it's got 2 USBs right on it, so I can plug in 3 actual things, and then also have 2 USB things plugged in. So I have a charger for my iPad, my phone, and the 2 things I need for my lighting gear, and 1 extra plug. So I can just bring that and have that. Like, that's all the shit that I need right there. Is 1 plug done. It's even got a little hook on it, so I can have it hook on the wire over here and have it hang from somewhere. So it works out real nice for that.
It's not a 21st century power supply unless it has some USB plugs in it.
Exactly.
21st century power supplies should actually have as many USB plugs as it does regular plugs.
Yep. I have a couple power strips that are like that too, with at least 2 USBs on each one, just so that there's somewhere that you can plug stuff in where it doesn't have to be taxing the computer all the time. Because if all I'm doing is charging something, I don't want to be anywhere near the computer. There's no reason for it. No reason for the computer to be involved with that.
Matter of fact, I don't want it in the computer because in some cases you're adding unnecessary drivers and other things. Like my phone, if I plug it into the computer recognizes it either as a drive or hey, it's the phone, and the computer is now has an additional device in it. If I just want to charge it, I don't want my computer getting confused by another device, especially if it's my music computer.
Yep.
My music computer, I don't want to do anything but make music.
I used to hate it when
notifications from Windows. I don't want blurps from messengers or anything. My music machine should focus on making music.
Used to be people would plug in their phones to their computers at work, and iTunes would pop up and try to synchronize. And it's like, that's not what
Yeah.
we want. That's not what you wanted. That's not what we wanted. It's like, just no.
The same with like the Windows updates. I've been in cakewalk sometimes in the middle of shit, and then boom, the new approach Microsoft is taking is so intrusive. It's like it's popping up a screen while I'm in the middle of recording. Like Windows,
I
you
hate
should
that.
know. Don't interrupt. The studio light is on right now.
Yep.
I'm recording. Don't pop up a window that first of all is modal. It cuts off anything else, takes priority, and says, I need to update my operating system right now. No, do not do that on this production machine.
Mhm.
And sadly, they don't really. In the old days, you could turn that shit off. With Windows 7, I used to optimize my machines, no interruptions with Windows 7.
Mhm.
Windows 8 started this new approach, and what they're doing with Windows 10, it's as bad as on the Apple side. No real options. If you want to turn that stuff off, you have to go down to the service level and turn off the updating service, which is not the best choice. But you know what? I don't need that updating service because if I want to update, I'll turn it on, do my updates, and then turn it back off. And do not run in the background. Do not tell me every other day that you checked for viruses and didn't find any. All that annoying shit does not complement a production machine
And in
and
your environment,
even
especially, because
office machines.
with as many machines as you have there, you're working as a network administrator or your little environment there. So any updates that you're going to get should all come to you as one download from out there.
Yeah.
You get it, you curate it, you get what you want, and then you push it to your machines inside. So that way you're
With
not pulling
with
everything across the traffic. Yeah.
yeah, with my bandwidth limitations, I really need to take the approach of like, okay, here's an update that my machines need. Get it once, put it on a centralized location, and then manually update each of my machines myself. Otherwise, every one of these machines is going to go suck up more bandwidth on me just to get the same files and the same update. And, and 20 gigs, I got 20, 30 gigs a month. If every machine does that every time it needs to, all
That's your
my
whole
bandwidth
allotment
that I
gone.
have is eaten up by unnecessary updates. Plus, you don't always want to update. Like some of these updates suck. You put them on one machine and realize, oh my God, my cakewalk's messed up now. And this has happened twice in the last 2 years. A Windows update came down, reset my audio system. And next thing I know, I went to go run Cakewalk. Cakewalk didn't recognize my keyboard anymore, didn't recognize my Mackie mixer. I had to go through and basically reinstall everything in order for it to reinitialize because Microsoft had changed the audio subsystem. You know, once in a while, Apple and Microsoft will drastically change the audio subsystem, and then some programs either don't work for a while until you refresh them, or you literally have to go get a new driver. That's why I hate Apples, because every time there's a new big Apple operating system, I remember once Mojave, they came out with Mojave. I had a client, beautiful Pro Tools setup. I had all his equipment, all good, upgraded to Mojave, and every program he was using basically said, you can't use this program until the manufacturer, till Pinnacle makes a new one for their video editor, till Pro Tools makes a new driver for their audio editor. Every piece of hardware that was audio based and video based needed to get an update from the manufacturer because the operating system changed the audio subsystem and the video. And you know, granted, it was an improvement what Apple was doing there. They were making an improvement in those things, but they took a horrible approach. You break everything, and now I have to go get individual drivers. Everybody who says, "Oh, Macs are easier. I don't need drivers. Everything just works when you plug it in," until you run a OS update and everything breaks on you. That doesn't happen as often in the Windows world, but it has happened a few times. Microsoft did. There's a 2021 update that happened actually in 2020. Because now the way Microsoft is doing their service packs, they no longer call it Service Pack 1, Service Pack 2, Service Pack 3.
Right.
Now they're doing it by year. Um, you cannot run the modern version of Photoshop or Adobe Premiere unless you upgrade your Windows 10 to 2020H, because they changed the audio and the graphics subsystem enough so that these graphic and video programs, they need this modern driver through Windows, and unless you update your Windows to 2020H, your Photoshop breaks.
And I wonder how much of that is from things like new technology with RTX and things like that, as relatively
That's
recent
exactly what it
development.
was. For Premiere, it was RTX. Matter of fact, Premiere tells you now for the last 2 years when you go to load it, if you don't have an RTX card and you have any of the lower end NVIDIAs, it says technically we're not supposed to work. This may work for you, but we won't guarantee it, and
Your mileage
we're not
may
supporting
vary.
it.
Yep.
Yep.
That's the
And if
key.
you
And we're not
really,
supporting it. Yeah.
if you really want to use these 3D features, because it's the 3D features that it actually affects. If you really want to use these features in Premiere, which of course, who wouldn't? Like, I buy this program because I want to use those features. But if you really want to use them, go buy a $400 video card.
Yeah, because that was really a quantum jump, though, again, in the way they were doing things. Like, video cards had been all incremental, a little better, whatever, for a long time. But then when it went from non-RTX to RTX, now you're talking about a jump. And that's where it's going to make a real line in the sand, where you either you have that card or you don't have that card going forward. And so, like, a year or two from now, if you don't have RTX, there are going to be a lot of things you're locked out of from that.
It sets a certain standard, not just for the makers of the games, the designers, because RTX is really, it really complements the developers. It is the programmers and the ones making the 3D models that are going to benefit from these cards. The end user, really, as long as their games load up, they're not the ones who really need the RTX technology. It's the developers, it's the game makers, not the game players. The game players, ironically, can go buy an AMD CPU with a Radeon, and in most cases, most of these games try to cater to the biggest audience with the least demand on the cards. When they do demand that kind of technology, those are the cutting edge games, like that Battlefield, that Jason was playing. Some of that's cutting edge. You do need some high end video gear.
And that's the thing, is it comes down to milliseconds there in a competitive game like that, where the person who has the least lag is going to be the one who gets the victory, because they see you before you see them, or you fired and you got them before they were able to get you because they were firing where you were, things like that. So yeah,
and the one with the most lag is the one with the most lag is the one everybody makes fun of, kicks them out of their team. Like, I can never play again. Oh yeah, hey, my poor brother, since we moved here, he's been a hardcore gamer for 15, 20 years. And I mean, granted, he's doing everything he can to compensate for it, but ping times, you're discriminated by ping times in those worlds.
Yep, absolutely.
And unfortunately, on satellite, there is no good up.
I mean, even mine. I mean, I'm getting 10 up here, and that seems
nobody
fine.
wants to play. Nobody wants to play with me.
Yeah. He's the one who doesn't get picked for kickball. They're picking, everybody else, everybody down the line, but not him.
And he has this, like, great computer, powerful computer. It can actually process fast as shit, but you're only as good as your weakest link in that case. And internet is still like one of the most important things in order to do it.
Yep. If you don't have it, you don't have it.
You can have a supercomputer, but if you have no ping times, you're still going to get shot.
Even when you talk about doing the larger projects that you work on, like projects that have 60 or 80 tracks or whatever it is, like huge numbers of tracks. I mean, if you're working on a machine that doesn't have enough memory to handle that, then you're definitely already you're already behind. Like you're not going to be able to get things lined up at all or easily, for that matter, if
Yeah,
you don't have a
and
machine that can handle it.
fortunately nowadays, it's not as bad as it used to be. In the old days, memory with a music machine, if it was 2001, 2002, memory was super important because you didn't want to get to swap drives and virtual memory, not for making music and loading samples. Now it's kind of reached a point where you can still do 60, 80 tracks. I've got older machines that I use as music machines once in a while, and they can still handle my projects. You get some dropouts during the production, but it doesn't affect, like, once I've got everything done, I might have to like start again a couple of times as the computer burped as I was putting things together. But once I've got everything together and you go to render your final mixes, even the older machines nowadays manage to do it in reasonable time, and they manage to do it. Like, it's not like the old days where if it couldn't handle it, you couldn't do it. Now you
Exactly.
just have to wait. You have to wait a little longer than you should have to wait.
Mhm.
I render on that machine, it could take me 3 hours. I render it on my music machine, it takes me 30 minutes.
Right. And that's a big difference. I mean, that's a big difference in what you can do in a
Wow.
day. But since you have so many machines around, it
I'd
doesn't matter.
rather
You could have
have
an
that
idle
two and a
machine.
half hours to go do other work.
Exactly.
So
That's the key.
to me, time is still money.
Mm-hmm. And that machine can sit there rendering all day for all you care. I mean, it doesn't have anything else that it has to be doing right now. So that machine render as long as it takes, and then you can still utilize your primary machine to do other stuff
Yeah,
that's important.
that's why it's nice to like spread your machines out.
Mhm.
That helped me a lot as I had a dedicated programming machine, a dedicated 3D machine, a dedicated music machine. I don't have to do nothing for 2.5 hours while that renders a 3D image for me. I can come over here, make music for 2.5 hours while that goes and renders. Then
And having
then you start
redundant
to
machines are good
multitask.
too. Redundancy is good too.
Yeah,
If a machine
yes.
craps out, dies, you're not without a machine entirely and not able to do anything. You have other options that you can make work.
Yeah, after my I had a music laptop. My main music machine before I left Connecticut was a laptop. After it crapped out, and I was so dependent on it at that point, I had basically, it was the only machine that I had the dual Windows boot up. I was testing Cakewalk and setting it up with all my different hardware. When it crapped out, and I realized like I was dependent on one machine like this, I now have three with the exact same setups: music machine here, music machine there, and a music machine over here.
Mm-hmm.
If any one of them craps out, it's not stopping me from doing my day-to-day work.
Exactly.
I'll have to fix that machine because I like to be able to multitask, and
Mm-hmm.
it's nice when you've got one thing going here. I'm bouncing tracks on this one. I can flip around while that track needs to bounce for 5 minutes. Well, I don't have to sit there and listen for 5 minutes. I'm going to go over here, start loading up something else, get a mix ready, come back, stop that track, start bouncing the next track, go back there, continue. It's really productive to not have to sit there and wait while the machine does its work.
Exactly. Multitasking at its best. Got to be able
And
to be
because
productive.
they're all networked, everything I do here, there, or anywhere, all my files are centralized. So I can load up the same project here, there, over here.
Mm-hmm. We're
I
usually
can load
doing
it up on Angie's machine over in Pennsylvania.
yeah, exactly. As I was going to say, is doing things remotely where I didn't want to occupy a whole lot of desk space with all these monitors like at the office. So I would just have my regular one or two monitors at the desk, but I would have machines in the server rack in the server room. Like we would, put a desktop machine in there and run power and network to it, and we would just
Yeah.
remote to it from here, and then fine. I can just, like you're saying, instead of tying up my machine to do some blah blah blah, I can just go remote to that machine, kick it off over there, disconnect, and come back here,
Oh,
do my stuff here, and just have it doing its thing. So I mean, I loved having
half the
machines like
time
that around.
when you see me like my head moving back and forth
Yep.
between these,
Yep.
I'm bringing up that machine
Mhm.
on this screen
Yep.
or that machine on this screen.
Because when you get used
Like
to that workflow, it's yeah.
I'm almost never looking at the actual screen of the machine. I'm
Mhm.
almost always bringing up the screen somewhere else.
Just don't get into the habit where you actually remote somewhere and then accidentally remote back here, and you're controlling this one from there, from here, and then you
Well,
get into that little loop
I
going on.
have tunnel remoted.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
have tunnel remoted. Sometimes I've had to. I've had to go into a machine to get to another machine to get to a third machine just to get to a network that is closed. You
Yep.
know, especially with my old job.
Closed, closed, but you were able to
Well,
get to it, so it's closed.
closed from the outside, but as soon as you can get into the network
Mhm.
and then get behind the network, I mean, there's very few machines these days that are not connected to something inside
Mhm.
of a subnet.
Yeah, and there's also
And
relatively
usually
few
it's
reasons
the
why
most
machines would
important
have to be
machines.
disconnected. Like the most important, exactly.
The
Certain machines
ones
are that important, but
the ones that are that far back, yeah, the ones that are buried like that are usually database servers and company machines that are meant to actually not be on a public network. You have to tunnel in to get to those because database servers, it's dangerous to have database servers wide open on the internet. That's how hackers suck up people's accounts and passwords
yep.
because those servers are too easy to get to.
Mhm. So you got to add that physical layer of you just can't get there from here.
And it takes some work to get there. If you
Even when you
happen to
need
be the
to, yes,
guy,
the guy.
yeah, when you're the guy who does need to reboot it because
Mhm.
it
Yep.
crashed.
That was always fun. At the one place, when people would leave the machines on all the time, which was good because we needed to do updates outside of hours and all that kind of thing. But when a virus would hit, for example, and it was one of those that had already gotten into the environment and we'd found it already and it was already proliferating and all that, but it was the end of the night, so it's like we had to go around and literally shut down or restart every machine. So we're like, we got to just be able to just send it by subnet,
Yeah,
get them all going. But this was a while ago,
yeah.
so at one point we did have to actually, back far enough, you did have
I,
to actually go run around all the desks. But
I have rebooted
mhm,
over 100 machines at once.
yeah, and the
It,
electricians were like, "What just happened?" No, it was a reboot, so they were all on anyway.
I know you could almost feel like a whoosh in the room when it happens.
Yep. From all the air, from all those fans kicking on at once. But it happens. Luckily, we haven't had to do that in a long time. The whole run around and
Now,
fire everything
unfortunately,
up or kick everything down.
my network administration these days is more my network, our private network, and much easier
Mhm.
for me. Like 30 years of doing that, I had my fill. I
Mhm.
really don't. I don't want to be a network administrator in 2021. It's
Yeah,
uh,
I
it's
hear
a
you.
different job.
Mhm.
It's not harder, but it's not fun either. When I was young and it was a learning thing and there was a lot of benefit to doing that stuff in my young IT days. Now I want my time to focus on music and creative outlets. I still need to deal with technology. You
Yeah.
need that in the music world, but I don't want to spend all my time fighting technology. I want to go make some music.
That's the key is you don't want to fight the technology, but you want to be able to work through the issues that we have with technology to get the technology working for us, get the technology out of the way of making the music. But you want to still
Yeah,
have the
and
good
you
toys so
see,
that you can make the good music. Yeah.
yeah, you have seen some of our battles with technology
Yeah. Yep.
in
Yep.
the music world. We're fighting audio interfaces and getting that audio interface to recognize into Zoom. And if you really want to complicate it, capturing the Zoom window to go into OBS
Mhm.
with that audio, but without your microphone, like,
Mhm.
the Joe scenario,
Mhm.
where you want to be able to get this, but you need to get rid of this part of it because otherwise your voice gets doubled.
Mhm.
These are the kinds of challenges that they're technical as hell.
Yeah, and that's
In
where the
some cases,
understanding
it
the
makes my
routing on
brain
things.
feel like it's going to explode. Yeah, it makes your brain feel like it's going to explode trying to comprehend a solution. Like, I
Mhm.
need to cut this audio out before, so that when I get the audio back, I can inject that audio back in. And
Mhm.
then we can hear Joe over here, but we don't hear him go into the Zoom and come out with everybody else, because he needs to
Yep.
capture that, but he doesn't need to capture his mic. But how do you do that? I
When I was first
still
trying it
haven't completely wrapped my brain around it.
with the voice meter banana, when I was first putting that in, one of the first solutions I had was trying to get my keyboard just coming in like that through the interface and getting through, and also having
Yeah,
the
that took
microphone
you a
coming
couple
through.
nights.
It did.
I
And
saw you fighting with that.
messing around. But I do like the fact that the Meticulous itself, the fact that it's picking up now is very cool. The fact that it can show on the screen what the intervals are that I'm hitting or what the chords are that I'm hitting, and tell people, whether it's major or minor or seventh and all that. I do like the fact that it's, hooked up to be able to do all that now. But the routing,
Yeah, I'm glad you jumped on that. Like,
yeah,
it took you less than a night to completely structure your OBS. I mean, I spent like a week playing with it and trying out, and you saw it and said, "Okay, that's cool." Boom. And like an hour later,
yeah.
instant to instant instructional screen.
And that's because you basically had it set up the way, just like this, the way I liked it, where it was okay. You have the keys at the bottom, so you can see whether it's the top of the keyboard or the bottom of the keyboard. You can see what's happening. You can see the pedals at the bottom. If somebody hits a pedal, you can see that. All that kind of things. The other keyboard's hooked up right now, but if that was going on,
And
but
it,
I
it
do like
is
that.
really great for for instructors that are out there. Originally, when I done this before, I think it was Rob Porter, one of Angie's friends,
Mhm.
who does guitar lessons. And with COVID and everything, he was saying like how he's having to do virtual lessons, and he
Mhm.
wasn't sure what to do, what approach to take
Mhm.
to start doing music lessons online. And I think this is something that will help tremendously,
Oh, absolutely. This
because
and Zoom in general,
because you
just
can.
having remote
Yeah,
access.
and Zoom, yeah, because you can display it in all the ways that somebody who's learning, whether it's the staff, for
Mhm.
some, seeing the staff is the right way. For
Mhm.
me, I love the keyboard. Like, I see the
Mhm.
keyboard and I learn instantly that way. And you guys with the guitars,
Mhm.
it's the same way. Guitarists look at the other guitarists and, oh, that's what you're doing.
Mhm. And that's also where, again, being able to translate or have this do the actual translation, where I can tell it, for the instrument I want to do, I want it to be a guitar or I want it to be a bass, as opposed to having it just set for a keyboard. I can just very easily change what it is as an instrument and, select it to show something else. And that way I could say on a 5-string bass, if you wanted to play a low G major, you'd be hitting low notes and it'll tell you like you're starting down there. Some of them
See,
don't make
and I
music that
bet
different.
you, I bet you. Well, yeah, you're gonna have to I ended up going through there and resizing that area
Mhm.
so that it fit each. You got to find the one that's the biggest, because it looks like it's the base. Once you get the biggest one, you resize all the smaller ones, and then it'll always fit in that space.
Nice.
But I bet you you can adjust that even for drop tuning.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're dealing with that 5-string bassist and you're or drop tuning on guitar with the ridiculous settings, it's probably just a quick click click and boom, now you're in drop B.
Yep. And you can tell them exactly where it's at. But that's the other thing
And
is
the tab is identical.
mhm, identical, just like that. But it makes it easy to learn. That's like the view of the keyboard is awesome. Definitely love that. And the fact they're able to record it in there. But when I was first doing the voice meter, that was the thing, is that trying to get this microphone and that keyboard separated was the problem. Because I was getting them both in, and then I was saying, okay, I want to route it this way, but I ended up trying to route my sound card output as through the voice meter, and then coming back in an immediate loop going wah, 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 wah. I
Yeah.
was like, okay, that's
Loop.
not it. No.
Mhm.
So I started using the other one that I had installed, which was not the view meters, but the other virtual cable that we had talked about. So I started routing the Ridiculous to that, and then bringing that into the voice meter banana, and that way I was able to get them separated on different channels, be able to individually EQ them or individually set the levels on them, and then bring the output to whatever level I needed to. So I was able to go around it that way. But it's one of those things where, yeah, the first couple times you look at it, you're like, wait, why isn't that working? Or why is that coming around as a loop? That shouldn't be happening. You're trying to wrap your brain around how you're going out from here into there, but oh, I'm using this virtual connector or that connection over there. Got to all bring it together. It's always about the routing and the effects for
With
that
the
matter.
virtual routing, that is the part that becomes the mind fuck. Um, we're used to like patch bays, and that's what in the old days I've had to wrap my head around patch bay routing.
Mhm.
But virtual routing, you no longer have the wires, and
Mhm.
you have more routing options. If you're really creative, you can pretty much route anything anywhere,
Yep.
but you will create loops very easily,
Mhm. And that's the tricky part. That
especially when you're
happened.
sucking in like a Zoom conference or something like that.
Yep. Or the first couple times I was trying to get I was doing things the other way rather than having all of my stuff going into the board and then the board going into my computer as like, having the board be everything that funnels everything down and then take from there into the computer. I was trying to do it the other way where I had my computer playing out to the board and had everything else playing to the board also. And I was just listening from there. So none of the stuff was getting into my computer, but I wanted it all to into the computer so I could route it into, the programs to record things. So I had to reverse the whole thing. But as I was reversing it, I set up some loops that way too. As soon as you plug it in, you're like, no, not like that. Like, turn that one down, take that out. Okay, no, that was a loop. You got to undo it and redo it now. But a lot of routing, a lot of cables, but get it all squared away. And then once it works, everything's wonderful.
Yeah, give us a tune for a second. I gotta check upstairs real quick. I think I heard the baby.
Sure. We're going to actually go with a share over here. I'll do it that way. Share. One over here that I was looking at for a thing on arpeggios. So let's take a look at this real quick. This one has A-shaped arpeggios going into the pentatonics. But it was basically just talking about starting in for the 7 chords that you work with in C major. So you're just taking all the white notes and going up. But when you're doing it on the guitar, it looks a little bit different. But by just using the skinny 3 strings, the important thing about this part here is just by using just the 3 skinny strings, you're making the chords a lot easier to work with than they would ordinarily be. Normally it'd be a little bit more tricky, trying to do all six strings at once or all 5 strings. But when you're dealing with just the 3 strings, it makes things a lot easier to focus. So for a major shape, you can just do this first one where it's showing the A major shape there. For the other one, you can do the A minor shape, but it keeps them all very close together and easy to hit. How's the baby doing? Everything nice and quiet?
Yeah, he's waiting for mom to come home.
Sweet.
She got 15 more minutes.
Nice. This is just one of those, like I was saying, just the C major, D minor, all the white notes moving on up. But this would be the way it would look on the guitar
See,
when you're doing it.
now, when I see it on the keyboard, it seems so simple. When I look at the tab,
Mhm.
I've never completely tab has never clicked in my brain effectively.
Yeah.
I
So
tried to learn guitar but as a freshman with blues guitar, and he taught in tab, and that's when I realized I wasn't going to make a good guitarist.
seeing it as isolated chunks can be definitely confusing. Like trying to actually look at it all together or look at what the pattern is just on one string is something that can help out a lot. Like seeing how things move laterally up and down the string, as opposed to looking at like this, where you're looking at hitting 3 strings at one time. That's getting a little bit more complicated right off the bat. But with just these 2 little shapes, though, you could play all the major and minor chords in that particular inversion. It's easier to show on a guitar, but this is just a quick one that I brought up because it was something I was working on earlier from one of the ones that made a connection, seeing
In
how that
those
connects in here.
in those shapes, what is the R and the 3 and the 5? What do those represent? Is that the
Scale
third
degrees.
finger,
That's
fifth finger? Is
Nope. That's root, third, and fifth.
Oh,
And then on the
gotcha.
minor shape, you see the root, flat, third, fifth.
Hmm.
So they're doing that. And then in this shape in the bottom left corner, it's showing you one of the pentatonic boxes, which is one of the ones that's pretty common that you'll see people talk about. That would be pentatonic box 1. A lot of people would call that. minor pentatonic. But you see how it's got the root as the red start there, and then it's got a second root at an octave later, like down and over. And there's actually a third one that's straight across where the yellow dot is on the far right. But those are the different roots of the same chord. Those are three of the same note, just at three different octaves. So you've got a low, at that point, it would be like a low, if it's the fifth fret, that would be a low A, and then a higher A, and then a highest A. Not highest, but three different A's at different octaves. But I just like the fact that these are the different chords as you're moving up in A major or in C minor, or sorry, C major or A minor. But you can see the frets that they're talking about in these in this section in the middle here, where it shows you the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, and the 6 chord. And it's showing you the capital for the 1 and the 4 and the 5, so those are major, and the lowercase for the 2, the 3, and the 6, because those are minor. But it's just those two shapes. So it's like you'll see the numbers on the left of each one of those, where it's like at the 3rd fret you do this shape, and that's major. At the 5th fret you do that shape, and it's minor. The 7th fret, same shape, minor. And as you move up, you would hear it would just sound just like. So you're just going up each of those chords in turn as you go up. But the important thing is seeing what with each of those, you'll see the root, the 3, and the 5 is what you're hitting. The root major third 5 or the root minor third 5, depending if it's a major or minor key. Should be all the white notes. Yep, just like that. But the thing is that feels the same when you're going up on the piano, but it is changing because that's a major chord and then a minor chord and then a minor chord, and then 2 major chords and then a minor chord. But it all feels the same because of the fact that we're moving up in the with the notes that are all in C major there. Same way with the guitar, how you can keep one shape and slide it up and down, and it's the same relative chord, like the major chord, but you slide it up 2 frets and you're going up from a D chord to an E chord, for example, but it's the same shape.
Yeah, but it feels a lot more consistent on a guitar or bass.
Definitely.
Where you're sliding around on that neck. For me, with this one on C with all white keys, easy to do. Change that from C to anything else, thinking major, minor, minor, major, major, minor. Whew.
But that's also where
Just
you
thinking
actually
about it as I start on a key, major.
You actually don't even have to think about it. That's almost overthinking it, because the way to really look at it is what key you're playing in. In this case, we're saying we're either in C major or A minor, and in that key there are no sharps or flats. So if we just pick a key,
it's actually
and say, let's play it in G.
It's
for
actually
example,
easier for me.
we would say we're playing in G, so we only have one sharp, just the F sharp, and then the only thing you're worried about in that whole progression is you'd start on the G, but the only thing you have to worry about is that F sharp when you're going past it. But everything else is all just the white notes, because you're still doing all those same things. So it's still technically that's major, minor, minor, major, et cetera, et cetera. But the only way you're really thinking about it is this key signature only has one sharp.
Just got to remember that F sharp.
Right.
Yeah, you just got to remember the F sharp.
Yep. And
that's the one I was playing with the other night. That one clicked in.
Nice.
One sharp.
F would be good. F is one flat, so that's the other side of it, which is just the B flat. So same idea, but you're using the B flat on the way through. And so it's just the one that you have to worry about on that whole thing. But it definitely messes with your head, especially when you're doing a song where it changes. You're playing at this chord, then you're playing that chord, then you're playing this other chord. So you have to be mindful of that. But as long as you're focused on what key the song is in, then these are the chords that it's all going to be built out of, essentially. Because they could borrow chords from elsewhere, as we've talked about. But for the vast majority of songs, if it is it's a 1-4-5 in the key of C, it's going to be using these chords. It's going to use that 1, that 4, and that 5. And if they're going to do something different, they'll probably be pulling from that 2, the 3, and the 6. Like those would be the ones to be looking at for that key signature. So it's very helpful to be able to move around and all that kind of thing. But this is just one that, for certain points in the journey, I like the fact that it only focuses on the skinny 3 strings, because that keeps things more manageable for hand size and all that. If you have difficulty making big chords or whatever, it just keeps it all pretty simple to deal with.
I ran into that the other night trying to play those jazz chords you were showing me, and I think there was a 13th in there and a 9th.
Sure.
And I'm like, I'm like, what?
Yep,
I
yep.
mean, I guess if you invert the chords and you use different inversions, my fingers can reach anything
Mhm.
if
Well,
I do it the right way. But
one of my favorites is to just
the
stack thirds.
stretches,
Just stacking thirds here. If we watch, like we do C, E, G, B, D, F, A. And what you're looking at there, that's all 7 notes. So that's all 7 of the white notes. And but these are now the 1, the 3, the 5, the 7, the 9,
tonight
and the 13.
on Days of Our Lives.
And that's a 13, yeah. But the thing is, the 11, or sorry, the 9, the 11, and the 13, if we look at them, that's actually the 2, the 4, and the 6. Because
Yeah.
that's the D,
And
the F, and the A. So those fit in down there to fill in, but they're up here, so they're extensions. So it's all the same notes. It's confusing as hell when you go through it that way, but it's
well,
just thinking about it as it's
and
only those 7 notes.
that's the part of my I told you my left hand very lazy, so I don't tend to play triads with my left hand.
Mhm.
I tend to do octaves.
Yep.
My thumb and my
Octave on the left is
pinky
great.
basically have always been like power octaves for whatever I do with my right hand. I need to start
Throw that
doing
5
some
in
of
there
these
too.
exercises.
You throw that 5 in there sometimes,
Oh yeah.
that'll help out a lot, because if you're gonna have, if it's in the key of C, you're gonna have
Hey.
a 5 in there, whether it's major or minor, and that way that keeps the left hand
Fifths
safe, but doing something where you can bounce.
Fifths
Where
are
you
the
can bounce down.
foundation. Power fifths are the foundation of metal
Oh,
and
absolutely,
rock.
absolutely. But down the low end, they can get muddy. Like if it's if you're doing constantly root
Yeah.
and fifth down the bottom, it can get ugly. But it's nice for a bounce to be able to go back and forth, get a little motion down there. But then you can deal with the 3 and the 7 in the right hand, or the melody lines or whatever. And the ornamentation, we'll say, is up in the other hand, but that keeps the solid something happening down the left. And it depends if you're playing by yourself or if you're playing with a band. If there's a band and there's a bass player already, you don't need to get fancy down there because there's already stuff happening down there. And that's where my buddy Mike, for example, would be doing inverted chords on the guitar, where he's doing chords where the lowest note is not the root note. So if he's playing a C chord, the C is not the lowest note he's playing, because the bass player is playing the C and he's playing an inversion of that C chord. So it sounds a little bit sweeter, a little bit different, because it's not rooted the same way.
And that's why it's nice to have like bandmates that are that have some theory and approach there,
Mhm.
because a bassist who does know good chord inversions will come up with much more interesting bass lines, because they're not just locked up to that like root note.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you can really build a melody by using because I've noticed that with the way that I do a lot of my chords and the inversions I do,
Mhm.
the melody ends up coming out off of my thumb as I'm playing the fifth, because of the way I tend to invert on certain minor keys.
Mm-hmm. Nice. You see those patterns happening, and you'll notice it. You'll recognize it in your own playing. Like you'll hear that move, so to speak, the next time you're listening back, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I know what I did there," because you recognize that you do that as part of your thing. Yeah, cool.
I've done it so long, like at this point, it's just nature to me.
And if it was a bad habit, it would be tough to break at this point because you've been doing it so much, right?
Well, now I'm trying to deprogram myself, so that I can start writing something new.
Mhm.
I'm still trying to refine and finish things that I've been writing for up till now in my musical life. I need to get ready to write new things, which means that I have to take some new approaches. These these different shifts and scales, the things you've been showing me for the last couple of months, are getting me prepared for a different kind of songwriting,
Nice.
a different kind of arranging.
Mhm.
All of this is necessary.
It's a great journey, and we're all in it together. I mean, we all learn from each other. So I mean, and even when it feels like, even if it's one person telling everybody, somebody else what all's going on, that person is learning themselves by going back over the stuff as well. Like, the best way to learn stuff is to teach stuff if you know it. So
Yeah.
it's like you're going over it, and as I'm going over stuff, I'm repeating things and driving things into my own head as we're talking about these things. So these things are great for me too. And again, I'm relearning keyboard from decades of having not touched keyboard at all. So I'm like trying to reinvent muscle memory.
You're relearning a lot faster than me. Just in the last couple of weeks, you're busting out Chopin.
Well, that was one that
I
that
can
was
barely
one of the
say
pieces
it.
that was one of the pieces that I used to do all the time. So there's 2 pieces by Chopin that were very common. Like the first chord was just like, and that was as soon as I hit that, it was like, oh, I remember that one. And it was like started building it out from there, and just one note after the next. And it's like, oh, that doesn't sound right. And then, it took 10, 20, 30 minutes, whatever. But after a while, I started building back into it, and the muscle memory came back. It was amazing to me. It was like, it's the riding a bike thing, but it was like the literal proof of it, because I hadn't touched that piece in literally decades. And it
Well,
just came back.
I'm glad that you're getting into the keyboards,
Mm-hmm.
and with the approaches you take, you can show me the kinds of exercises that are going to help get my fingers back into the shape that I need them to be in.
Yeah.
Scale rolling. I mean, I've never been a jazz or a blues keyboardist, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to do those,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that I'm going to have to start doing some scale exercises and uh, some chord exercises, like what I was trying to do the other day when you showed you said like here's some good jazz chords to try. So I looked at them and I said, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I tried playing the chords, but I was playing them my way. Then I
Mm-hmm.
started thinking about how to bounce my hands and make it sound jazzy or
Mm-hmm.
bluesy, because they're telling me these are the chords. So it's not enough just to know the chords. There's
There's a feel with it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an approach to it that makes it jazz or makes it blues as much as the chords that you're playing.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's the other side of it that I need to find some good exercises, find some good tutorials. Some of these videos you've shown me, these they explain it nice and simple. Something I thought was like super complicated. It sounds complicated, but when they actually just do it and go through it slowly, it clicks. And
The one I have in mind specifically is the one with that guy with the hand actor, the keyboard guy, Oliver
yeah.
Payne, I think his name was. He's a German guy. But he, just the one he was talking about, the 3-finger motor system, where most of what he's doing is all just the thumb, index, and middle fingers. He's just using those, but he's doing all these amazing solos, whether he's playing in key or whether he's playing out
Yeah,
of
and
key, and he's only using those three
those are
fingers, and he's only using 2 grips. He's only using like the first half of a pentatonic grip, and then a little chromatic piece in the middle, and then the same grip again. And by doing that little pattern, you can just be flying all up and down the keyboard. We're going to go over that one next time, because that's one that I think he had 2 or 3 videos that were kind of related on that same subject of the 3-finger motor system. But that one in particular, after I saw that and kind of looked at it, I haven't really revisited. But when I go back and revisit that, that's going to make a big difference, because that is just a way of keeping that bounce going. And just using those 3 fingers was big for me, because again, it's been so long since I did scale exercises that I don't have the speed that I used to have when I did have any speed. But even just doing little moves, like one of the big ones you see the people do, the slide up, where they come like
yeah.
all the way up the keys like that, and then landing, like taking that and like having a chord at the end. And I always thought that was the coolest thing, where they're sliding up with the left hand and then landing into a chord with the right. And it's like, oh, that sounds so awesome, especially on,
It's pretty cool. It's
Mhm.
cool to see how it interprets it there, because it does it in a dual pattern as you're doing it.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're fucking good at that. You
that was
actually keep it on
that was
the
just
seconds all the way through.
just drag it on the back of the thumb right there, and then just be ready for the landing when it gets there. So that one's fun. The other one that Jeff, that I learned from cousin Jeff, actually was more of, I would call it a smush, where it's like
Oh,
he's playing and he's just a little smush with the hand, and the smush goes like, and like, so you like get just a couple of notes that are all right near each other, but just kind of and it's like, you try to look at that on sheet music, it would look ridiculous, right? Because I mean, what does that even look like? It's grace notes.
and I hear Jeff do that shit all over the place when he's playing keyboards.
Yep.
He's a very it's like watching Play-Doh on top of like instruments, and it just like molds it. He's very fluid,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, he can literally hit notes around whatever the hell he's playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he
Inside or
could
outside
literally
or anything.
change. He could change into any scale on the fly if you said, "Hey, go to E minor from you know
Oh yeah.
G major." No matter where you were, I think he would find a way to mold right into the key he needs to.
And you can tell him to do it in any
Which
style too. Give me a Lydian in a reggae style. Go. And just there it is.
which is a true skill. I mean, it's
Mhm.
hard enough to get like relational scales and chords to sound nice with each other, and they're supposed to. Like
Mhm.
these are meant to sound good
They're
with each
built
other.
together.
It's
Yeah,
hard
yeah.
enough to it's hard enough to get those to sound good together, but he seems to be able to hit a chord and then hit another chord, and even if they're not even relational, he finds a way to bridge the gap,
Mhm. It's
which
that
is
deeper
why I think
understanding.
he can play that Hungarian reggae. It's like
The important elements of
I'll
each,
play in
and you
all
combine them together.
scales.
You mush those important elements together, and you get it, and get it working just like it should. But yeah, I'm
And
definitely
that's
having a ball
why
with the keyboards too.
doing half step. I was playing with Jason the other night, and it finally clicked into me the half step approach. Where I mean, we weren't in a key at one point. I was just basically doing half steps all the way down here. Let me switch over. I'll show you what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Mm-hmm.
doing.
Little chromatic phrases. Yeah, nice. And that's both about
And
where it's about where you land, and it's about where you linger. Yeah, yeah.
yes.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Mm-hmm.
When it finally clicked into me, like how easy this was, because I mean, I've done it in the past, but it never just registered. And
Mm-hmm.
as I was jamming with him and I was finding my drop points, like this is where I wanted to land,
Mm-hmm.
and then this is the shift I wanted to do, and then I wanted to go back, do the pattern again, land, and
Mm-hmm.
then shift some more down, land. And with that approach, you technically can land anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You just
Yep.
have to have the slide and the amount of notes that you want to do half step wise until you get to your landing spot. And,
Yep.
and it was like ear opening for me, thinking, holy shit. And I really can write a dark metal song right now and shift from any key into any other key that I want.
Yeah. And the other fact is there's only those 12 chromatic notes. So, I mean, once you start doing a little chromatic pass like that, if you were using 7 of those notes in that little thing you were doing right there, there's only 5 others. So then that's all of them. So, like you said,
Yeah.
from any key to any key and using any of those that you want in the middle, it's just a matter of intent and, hitting them confidently and, seeing that it sounds right for what you're trying to do. That's the main thing. It sounds good to you. It
By
sounds
the
good.
time we were done, I had used all of them.
Well, and that's how
I
you know
ended up
there's no
going
wrong notes.
down and
Yeah.
down and down, yeah, until I got back to where I wanted, the D.
Mm-hmm. Nice. That's a good place to be. Not sure how
Yeah,
Ange is doing on time over here.
that was a fun exercise.
Yeah. And that's a good one. I
Ange, yeah,
mean,
it's almost
allowing yourself to do that
pumpkin
stuff
time,
is the
huh?
important thing. Like one of the things that always got me was the I guess just self-doubt about hitting notes and being afraid, like if it's the wrong note, like you're recoiling because it's the wrong note, right? But you gotta approach it like a kid. A kid will just start smacking stuff and make noise and see what sounds cool, and then you work your way into it from there.
I have a 2-year-old who has been coming down here every day, and
Nice.
like at dinner time,
Mm-hmm.
he's been coming down, jumping on this, and starts pounding on the keyboard. It's awesome. I
Nice,
I
nice.
love it.
Mm-hmm.
The only freaky thing is he's hitting those buttons like he's a DJ. He
Yep.
put my keyboard in a mode the other day I'd never seen. I was like, what
What did
the
you do?
hell?
And he has no idea what you did
Did you
either.
I had to shut it down and
Yeah.
reset it.
Yeah.
I didn't know how he got into it. I
Yep.
didn't know how to get out of it.
Got to like
But
kid proof
man,
the top layer and have just the keys out so that you can just hit just the part that you can make noise with. But yeah, that's the thing is they have to be, willing to hear wrong notes when you do it. Just like people say, how do you follow your ear to hear how people are playing songs? Because they start playing a song and I can figure out what key they're in almost immediately because I hit a note and it's either the right note or it's not. And if it's not, it's either too high or it's too low. So I just, I know which direction to go on the guitar neck. So I just hit a note, and if it's not the right one, I just kind of like work my way up or down to find it. And you can find your way there real quick. You do the same thing on a keyboard, and it doesn't matter what note it is. If it's, A flat, like, okay, well, fine. And then I just work from there and say if it's going to be A flat minor, then it's going to be this one and that one and that one. Those are the first three because it's going to be a whole step
Yeah.
and then a half step. So it's like you kind of make the scale right from there, and you see which notes are right, which ones are wrong. I'll usually start from a pentatonic though, because usually any melody lines that's being sung or whatever is usually going to focus on a pentatonic line.
See, with the writing I'm doing lately, I'm really trying to I'm trying not to think in the key. I mean, a lot of times I am in a certain key,
Mhm.
but I'm trying to find the notes I want to hear. And
Yes.
in most cases, it is the obvious notes. It's like, oh yes, I do like a 1 4 5. I know I like those.
Yep. There's a
But
good reason that you like
sometimes when
those. Yeah.
I'm writing now, yeah,
Mhm.
and in some cases, what I'm finding, especially in the last like 4 months, jamming with Jason, you, Joe, is I'm looking for the notes that are not so obvious, which are part of those modal shifts and
Oh yeah.
things you've been showing me.
It'll flavor
W-
things. Sure.
Yeah,
Things that make people's
a
ears sit up and
different
take notice. They're like, "Oh, that's different. Wait, what did you just do?" Because that's different than what I'm used to hearing when people play in that key. Yeah.
yeah a different shift from say like a D to an A. Is it D major to A major, which earlier when I was working with Lou trying to figure out like is this G to D and is it major to major, major to minor,
Yep.
um, trying all the combinations. I'm realizing that some of the things that I used to do because I just thought I liked that the most,
Mhm.
I didn't realize how much I'm liking some of these other approaches because
Where you take
I
a
was
minor
doing
third to major third. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, the G minor, which is not one that I typically do. Hold on,
Mhm.
this one that I was doing before the show, I really like how it sounds.
Mhm. Nice. I like that too.
And
Very cool.
I'm thinking of like on the bass side, like yeah, I'm trying to think of what my left hand can do to that.
Mhm.
And this is where like going by ear, like what do I want to hear then? That having to flesh it out. I didn't used to flesh out my melodies, but
It's a good
now
approach, though.
I
Mhm.
feel I feel like if I don't, I'm
Mhm.
not going to get the melody I want.
Right.
I want that like
Try G, F sharp, and E for the first three. Yeah. third one might be a little off, but that's the other way. Try G, F sharp, G.
The E doesn't feel right.
Yeah, go from the G to the F sharp, back to the G.
I actually want to flat the E.
Ooh, yeah, you can do that too.
I want it to be like this scary drop. Dun 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 dun.
That's where I was thinking, actually. How about G, F sharp, G?
Trying to write the next Phantom of the Opera. See, that's the fleshing out process. That.
Mm-hmm. And that's where starting with the skeleton structure of the chords and then building out from there, definitely helpful.
Well, I know the chords at the points that I want them to be at are, you know.
And use those as anchors, and then we can kind of work from one to the next. Yeah.
Yeah, when I'm thinking of like because I want to hear a cello doing that.
That's supposed to be a cello.
We're gonna have to work more on that later.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I think Anne's gonna be ready for pumpkin mode soon. So if she wants to hop in.
I think she said she was okay for the moment.
I thank you all for tuning into Amplified as we go ahead and we end this edition of Talking Shh. I said I.T with Glenn and Tony. Tune in
I get the
tomorrow
last
night. We'll see you at 9
She
p.m.
said so.
Okay, get the last. Go for it. Shush them, everyone. So.
Night, everyone.
See y'all next time.
Oh, you took the last. She said.